How are you enjoying Final Fantasy 16?
Dude, it's good with caveats, which is so weird. It's so good and it's also so strange in some other ways. It's like really hard to describe. Um,
What are you feeling so far? So you're not too far into the game. Like I think you still have a solid amount left.
I
Like you're
think so. Yeah, like that's also part of it too. Is like I feel like I've been playing for a really long time, but I think I'm also like still at the kind of the beginning of like the story. Um, so
I
I
think
don't
you're around like a
know.
third. I think you're around like a third.
Yeah, I think that's because it seemed like some stuff just happened where it's kind of like, oh, here's like this is the real hub. Like this is
Yeah,
really
yeah,
where the
yeah.
mission
They kind of threw me
starts.
through
Like,
a loop with that,
yeah,
which I don't want to drop too many like spoilers, but
yeah,
yeah, like you play a lot, and then it's like, that wasn't any. None of that was actually like
yeah. It's
real.
like that was the prologue. Like literally,
Yeah,
it kind of feels like a
yeah. It
whole.
it, it feels like there's a real prologue, like an actual prologue, and then all of a sudden it's like the first like 15 hours was prologue.
Yeah, it's like a fake out for instead of like a fake ending. I think the game has like multiple
Like a
fake
fake beginning.
beginnings. Yeah, actually, though, it's so interesting, man. Like it's so I someone on Reddit I think phrased it really well where it's like they're like it's like the most exciting and the most boring game I've ever played.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is
It
kind of
had
how
it
I feel
definitely has some pacing issues.
like these ups and downs where like it's so hard to describe. I actually think it's remarkable. I've never quite played anything that's made me feel this way where there are periods of time where like you're just kind of going through down a hallway and like you're pressing what feels like sort of the same buttons, you're picking up loot that doesn't really matter and you're like,
Yeah,
man, like am I really having fun? And then like something happens, like there's some sequence and you're just like that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. You're so
yeah,
hype, you feel like you're dancing in combat and you're like, damn dude, this game rocks.
yeah.
And then it kind of like goes down
Settles
again
down
and
again.
settles
Yeah,
down and you're like it's
I
really
think I think
wild.
they do a better job of that the more it goes. I think it
Yeah.
kind of ends up like evening out.
Hmm.
It definitely has some pacing issues. I definitely have some problems with it, but I think I'm earing towards the side of calling it like an imperfect or like a flawed masterpiece.
Yeah,
Like
that's
it's so good. Like
for sure.
I really ended up like clicking with the story by the end.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like
That's
in
that's
like
what's
crying, just like
keeping
the
me going.
characters are
Like,
so good. Like
not surprising, Final Fantasy has like an engaging story, but that
yeah,
really is what's keeping me going. I mean, and it's fun too. Like, I'm having a lot of fun with it. But like, there's just something about the level of I don't know, like the level of detail with this world that they've made, like the environments, like the little nods to the storytelling, even the side quests. It's funny. There's a great article I meant to pull it up for tonight, but I forgot. It's
well,
the head.
hopefully you'll finish it within a week or two, and we'll circle
Yeah,
back.
there
Maybe
there
we'll
was a
do. Maybe we can
headline.
make that like our first review episode.
Oh,
We'll
that'd
do
be fun.
like
Actually,
an
yeah,
in
do like
betweener.
a deep dive there.
Yeah.
There was an article that was like the side quests in Final Fantasy 16 suck, and I don't care. And I kind of agree in that it's like they're not well, structurally, gameplay wise, like they're not amazing. A lot of it is just kind of fetch quest stuff, but they all serve a purpose. They serve a purpose of world building, of developing characters, of like
Right. Right.
ebbing and flowing the pace and stuff. So I find that like even though at the end of the day it's like they're not necessarily like giving you a ton of things that you're going to use in the game, like I enjoy doing all of these side quests because it's like little stories, little vignettes that I think kind
Yeah.
of grow the world so much.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Exactly. A lot
yeah,
of the quests, like the quests themselves, might not be like the best activity. Like it's go find the three of these, kill them, whatever.
yeah,
The actual like writing in the quest is they're majority of them are pretty outstandingly written.
yeah, yeah. There's been a
But
few where I've really had like some little emotional moments, like oh, that was
yeah,
really
exactly.
sweet, like that was
There's
well
a few
done.
duds. There's a few duds, but like
Of
for the
course, there
most
always
part,
are.
they're really well written, I think.
Yeah,
And if you see a side quest with a plus instead of a normal
yeah. I just
exclamation,
I just found the first one, and I got
yeah,
the
those all give you things to that
yeah.
actually impact your game. Those are like almost always enhance or unlock a new mechanic.
For sure. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Like it's to me, it feels kind of like God of War Ragnarok in that I feel like I'm almost approaching it. Weirdly enough, there's a lot of parallels. I think I'm kind of approaching it the same
There's
way in that like
there's and
I
same with
don't.
Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, yeah. Like I can't. I can't like binge it, you know, like I can't sit there and play it for like 6 hours straight. I feel like I need to do like a little chunk of the story, do some side quests, and then kind of like, I don't know, digest it and, you know, play something else
and
or do
and
something
and
else.
you and the way they structure it, you go to an area, you like learn what this area is, what how it what its history is and how it exists within this world. You like
Yeah.
connect with those people, what their problems are, like how their mother crystal impacted the way that they live, or their icon impacts the way that their land is shaped.
Hmm.
And then you spend a lot of time there, and then you move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So it's like, you kind of feel like you wrap these little like stories within
Yeah.
stories while you're in each thing, and it's hard to just jump from one to the next because you
Yeah.
almost take like big deep breaths once you leave an area.
Really, like it's very funny. There's a few moments that it's so funny. It is literally almost like the end episode of a TV show ending, where like
Yeah,
there'd be some moment where it's just like here, here, and you know they clink glasses, and then it fades to black,
yeah, yeah,
and then it
literally.
like fades back up, and like you're kind of in a different little narrative beat.
It's
It's
like
like
start of
literally
the new
like
season where
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
like episodic kind of
and
structure.
those kind of feelings I find are very double-edged swords in games, because I think that's
Hmm.
what ends up driving a lot of the like, oh, we got to do this again, like
Yeah, yeah, because it's
you're
the
starting over a
stopping,
little
the
bit.
starting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the stopping, the starting. But overall I think it's really good. I really like the combat, like,
Hmm.
um it's I think one thing that I think we've talked about this a little bit is like they don't do a good job of like telling you what actual combos you can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff
They're
that's kind of unexplained.
all just like, like square and X to lunge, and square and X to dive slam, and like, circle to Phoenix shift, but they don't tell you like, oh, you can actually chain all those together.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
for
Because
sure.
I've watched a lot of people on Twitch who are literally just hitting square 4 times. It's a sword swing, 4 sword swings, and then like they'll circle through their abilities and then they'll back to the sword swings. And it's like, yo, you
Yeah,
can you can you can do square and triangle. You can do like sword boom, sword
I love the
boom, and then
sword boom, dude. That's so
yeah, the sword
satisfying.
boom,
I
and
try to
then
pull
like
those
once they
off.
go flying, you Phoenix shift to them. You do like the auto down stab onto their stomach. Then you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
Torgal knock them in the air. You phase up to them, slam them down. You can
yeah.
do the sword boom in the air too, and he does like a special magic down boom where he like
Oh shit, I
wrestles.
didn't even know that.
Yeah, exactly.
I got to go to the freaking training zone, man. Like it's tough because you don't want to over tutorialize your players and make them feel like, come on, like can I
Yeah,
just play the game now? But at the same time, like I feel like they could
I,
there could
I
have been
and
a
I
bit
think
more.
there's a large audience of Final Fantasy players who are so unfamiliar with this style of game
Yeah, real
that,
time combat kind
yeah,
of hack and slash.
exactly. I mean, I don't even play that many of this type,
Yeah,
but I think
I
there's a
don't
less
either.
there's a, you get a lot of Final Fantasy 14 people who are playing this, and they're just like, I mean,
The hell am I
they
doing?
press
Yeah,
square 4 times because they don't know,
yeah, yeah,
but and then they use their abilities like it's like an MMO wheel, but
yeah,
it's really cool. I feel like the game does one of the best things about it is that as it goes, it feels like it opens itself up more and more, and
yeah.
like the story, but also like the mechanics
Yeah, I can feel
and the
more stuff kind of
abilities.
coming
Yeah,
into play.
it just keeps building on top of itself in like multiple ways, and by the end, you're like, or at least I was like, this is so awesome. Like it's just,
Yeah, yeah.
that's like the best way to describe it. It's just awesome. Like by the end, I'm like, this is just such an awesome thing.
So
So much
cool.
cool things. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I
So
can't wait
it
to get
has
further in.
it has flaws. It definitely has flaws, and I think like I think it's like 88 on Metacritic is probably accurate. Like if
Hmm.
I had to say,
Yeah.
but right now for me, it's probably my favorite game of the year. Like I even over Tears, and I thought Tears is like
Yeah,
is a
pretty
really
damn
special
good.
game,
Yeah.
but this is just different. This was just something that was like very different than
Hmm.
anything I had like played,
Yeah, yeah.
and if anything, it's just an incredible spectacle.
Yeah.
It's a showcase of spectacle,
Hmm.
and it was just like full of quick time events but they're just so cool. It's like it's awesome. It's like,
Like you press circle to dodge in the middle, like a big like cutscene
yeah,
moment in the fight, and you're like, I might as well have not pressed it, but it still felt good to do. You're
it's
like,
so cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's so, even like all the choreographed moments are still just equally as cool as the non choreographed moments. And the
yeah.
last thing I'll say too, which I think is so unique to this game,
Hmm.
and for those who don't know, Yoshida, I don't know his last name, but everyone calls him Yoshi P, the game director for Final Fantasy 14. He's
Hmm.
an absolute legend. Like he pulled that game out of literally a death state. That game was dead.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, he has created like one of the best MMO stories ever over like 5 expansions. Very impressive stuff. Like you've looked into this, the way he runs his teams apparently is like
Yeah,
runs them
pretty
like a
pretty
machine.
remarkable. Yeah,
Yeah, and he just also does that amazing managerial stuff while like innovating, create like his encouraging his teams to innovate creatively, which
hmm
he's a guy. He's like a legend. He's a genius.
yeah,
So when we found out that he was working on this game, I was like so hyped because for the
yeah, yeah,
quality of the story, I was like, okay, well, at least we know the story has a very high chance of being, at worst, just good. You know what I
yeah, for
mean?
sure. Yeah,
And but the story ended up being awesome in my opinion. But also you get like boss fights that feel like MMO
hmm
mechanics
yeah. I
translated
think
to
that
real
really is
time
the
action.
highlight. I think like
Yeah,
the boss fights are so cool. They're so exciting.
there's it's like the second boss. If no one wants to hear this mechanics, you can mute this for a minute. But the second boss, I think, where you're in the church and you're fighting like two of the Garuda minions,
Yeah, yeah.
and like they're doing like the AOE damage lanes, showing you where they're gonna like
Oh
swoop
god,
in and out of.
that was sick.
The second I saw that, I was like, oh my god, like this is literally Final Fantasy 14. This
Yeah,
is the
like
coolest thing
there's a
ever.
boss in Shadowbringers that does that. I'm like thinking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then
Yeah,
there's another boss that does like the demon wall where you have to like zoom between the little gaps. I'm like, that's
yeah. They're
another
shooting walls
MMO
at you.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
like all the balls coming out in like circles, spirals, and all
hmm
the AOE indicators. You have to just like run out of or to zip out of, teleport out of usabilities to get out of.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so cool. Like the way that he was able to translate, him and his team were able to translate that combat design to entirely different genre is like really unique and cool, I think.
yeah. I agree completely. Obviously, like I still have a ways to go, and my opinions might change, but like for its faults, I think like it's just so cool to see a game like just do some stuff like this. Like really, it's very ambitious. It's a very ambitious game.
Yeah,
It plays it safe in some ways, gameplay wise, like with the stats and the gear and stuff, which I think
yeah,
like might as well kind
yeah.
of not even be in it.
Hmm.
But
Yep,
like gameplay wise,
exactly.
it's just it does some really freaking cool stuff.
Yeah, I understand what people, those articles about like how like the art, criticizing its RPG elements. Like I totally understand. Like
hmm
leveling up feels is like useless. Like
Yeah, it's just you might as well it's like an action game. It's an
yeah, it's like
action
an
game
action game.
with story, with side quests and stuff like that.
Leveling up
It's
feels
yeah.
useless. Like the gear will eventually feel less useless because
Mm.
the one thing I'll say is like you
The
end up
accessories
getting
seem to make like the
the
difference.
accessories
Like
are really
yeah,
cool.
loadouts and stuff.
And yeah, like the gear, there's no like unique effects to gear besides the accessories. Like there's no
hmm
like benefit to using one sword over another. It's just like, oh, this sword's stronger. And I
Yeah.
think that's where it like loses its RPG stuff.
hmm
But you basically get the best gear through side quests for anyone that's
Cool.
curious. But I think one of my biggest criticisms of the game is I think the level design in the early parts of the game
Mm.
and some of the areas, like it doesn't have the best design. They're visually gorgeous, but like something that God of War Ragnarok had and Jedi Survivor had is that like almost every inch of those areas, pretty big areas, like you can find crazy things like
Yeah,
little
it
like
felt
tunnels and
intricately
hidden
detailed.
dungeons and stuff and like all these little things. And that's why those areas exist and are structured the way they are, because they want people to
Yeah.
explore and find all this cool stuff. Ragnarok probably had some of the coolest exploration rewarding ever. You like one minute you're like exploring around whatever little hole in a desert, the next you like have two giant jellyfish flying through the sky, like making children jellyfish star babies. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't really exist in this game, but it does find its cool moments elsewhere. But I just think the area design and the level design is probably one of the like weakest parts of the game,
hmm
because it's just like there's no reason to like really explore it besides like
Yeah. Yeah.
some things
Yeah.
like some things that you'll see. But yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I,
can't wait to keep pushing and then kind of see where it goes. Like just very curious about the story, man. Because like I'm loving where it is so far, and there's just lots
yeah,
of back and forth stuff. People being like, "Oh, it falls off," and some people being like, "No, that's when it gets good." So I'm like, "Who
yeah.
knows?"
I think the people that say it falls off are kind of nuts. I think it keeps getting better and better. Like
Yeah.
I think it keeps getting better and better.
Mm.
Personally, I've seen some people who have like interesting takes on like, oh, it's bad. It's bad because it's sad. Like I've seen like multiple people say that. Like the
Yeah.
problem with the
Bad things
story is
keep
that it's
happening to
sad.
people.
It's like what? He's what? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, Clive learns that slavery is bad. Like, shove that down my throat. Well, what are you talking
That's
about?
sort of what the game's about.
But also, he didn't learn slavery is bad. Like, he was literally a slave.
Yeah, like that's the whole. It's the arc of
He's literally the gladiator.
yeah. That's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's for anyone who's it's very similar to the Stormlight Archive series of books by Brandon Sanderson.
Okay.
There's a character, one of the main characters is literally like branded as a slave and works in the military on the front lines. And I actually wonder, I'm curious if like anyone working on this game narratively is familiar with those books, because there is some similarities, and not in like a ripped off kind of way, but I think like
Even
thematic.
if not, I'm sure that they were influenced by it.
Yeah,
Because
in a
the
good way. I
same
think it's a very
yeah.
cool concept. I think they do it well.
In the same way, you can see like there's influence here from Game of Thrones, or like
Yeah,
or
for sure,
probably Dune. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely some Dune stuff.
Like, it has that geopolitical aspect.
Yeah.
I think some people were mad that like kind of maybe takes more of a backseat as it goes. Jeff, you could probably already feel happening.
Yeah, I mean it's
to where you are, but like
I totally get that. Like
I get that, but at the same time, it's like, guys, there's like mother crystals and
yeah, it's Final Fantasy, baby. There's chocobos,
elemental
there's
deities
crystals
flying around. Like, we only care about the family backstabbing so much. Like, okay, like it's there,
sure.
It's ingrained in it for sure. It's just not the forefront, which is, I think that's fine.
Yeah, they use it as a backdrop to tell like a big wacky, crazy magical story, which is
I think it's actually a cool way
Fantasy.
to like do the Final Fantasy thing again, but just like a little bit.
Yeah, grounds it a little bit more.
Grounded is like funny because of what's happening, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah,
it puts like it makes the human relationship aspect of it like a little more there.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I mean, it's the most quote unquote realistic I think Final Fantasy has felt. While keeping that magical, realism of like just monsters and magic and everything. I think it's cool. It's a very combining kind of like low fantasy with high fantasy.
Yeah, it's so funny when you're on the first level in the Great Woods and Clive's like, "Oh, the goblins are here." You know what I mean?
These damn things. Then you find them and they're just like nasty gross little creatures.
I love when the one fakes you out, or when he blows the horn and the big one just comes strolling through.
I love the Gigas, whatever they're called, the big boys.
Gigahas. But yeah, no, I'm excited for you to finish it. I think when you finish it, maybe we can do like a bonus episode where we just like, I would love to do like some game reviews and stuff. Just
we can dive into it a bit more, for sure. That'd be great.
Yeah, 30 minute little bits. We'll revisit this. I'm excited to see what you think.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, dude, let's get into it. This is a crazy week.
Yeah, let's touch on it. Let's touch it all.
Let's touch it.
This was a big week. Lots of crazy things happening in the gaming industry, outside of the gaming industry. The arts, the sciences.
Lots of things going on.
Yeah.
The biggest
Here's
one.
our favorite topic that we just can't quit.
Can't go away. It refuses to die.
Yeah.
Refuses to die, and I have a feeling it's not going to die anytime soon.
Nope. Certainly not.
Microsoft wins FTC fight to buy Activision Blizzard. Oh my God, they did it. But wait. No,
wait.
A California judge is allowing Microsoft to close its acquisition of Activision Blizzard after 5 days of grueling testimony. Microsoft still faces an ongoing antitrust case by the Federal Trade Commission, but Judge Jacqueline Scott Corley has listened to arguments from both the FTC and Microsoft and decided to deny the regulator's request for a preliminary injunction. So for those who don't know, basically what this was, I think there's a lot of confusion about this. A lot of people I think a lot of people online think that the FTC like straight up lost its case against the Microsoft Activision merger, which is not really at all what happened. Mm-hmm. Essentially, and I could be getting this wrong. Like, someone's probably going to listen to this and be like, what is he talking about? But essentially, the FTC filed an injunction on the deal so that the deal would basically be halted. And I think the FTC's goal was to essentially halt the deal over the expiry date that was set, which I think is July 18th. I don't think they expected that to work, honestly. I think it was just kind of like an option that they had that would have been like a missed opportunity in their eyes if they just didn't try to do it.
Yeah.
So basically, the FTC filed for the injunction, tried to put a hold on the deal, let it go past the expiry date so that the deal could not close. They did 5 days of testimony, and the judge officially, like a week or two after, denied the injunction. So Now what'll happen is the FTC will bring its full antitrust lawsuit to court, and I think that starts in August. So once the deal actually goes through, then we'll get like multiple more months of these kinds of articles.
The good stuff.
Of the good stuff. We'll get way more than 5 days of hearings. We're going to get like probably weeks.
Yeah.
But this whole thing is really interesting. I followed it a little bit. I tried not to because honestly, I'm finding the story kind of annoying. Not annoying, but it's just so persistent.
I know.
But like we talked about it last week, so many funny things were said. Like a lot of like PlayStation numbers came out. A lot of different things came out of this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think the FTC actually did like a pretty poor job from what I read of what they were arguing. I do think they came across as like trying to defend Sony more than like trying to fight against like anti-competition, like trying to fight against the creation of a monopoly. And the judge basically saw it that way too. But I think the judge also has like did not seem to have a very strong understanding of the landscape. When you put like her writing, like her decision against like what we remember, we read the CMA document. The CMA document is like such an amazing, thorough understanding of the landscape versus what she said. Like the things that the way she spoke about it, like she just doesn't really seem to understand the landscape in the way that will allow her to make a decision based on like long-term potential consumer harm.
Yeah.
So like it's a lot of her decisions seem to be like, oh yeah, I don't know why would be anti-competitive. Like you know, this will like, you know, have games go to Game Pass and prices will be cheaper for the consumer right now. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So one thing also is that they filed for an appeal. They said that the judge essentially like her foundational understanding or interpretation of the law is actually incorrect, and that when it comes to antitrust cases, it's not it's not that the merger, that a potential trust will harm competition, it's that it may. And in her acknowledgement and her denial, she referenced there's no proof that it will. So like there is a argument going around that her foundational understanding of the law was incorrect when she made the decision, or that she made her foundational decision with the incorrect with an incorrect underlying legal ideology. So there's a lot of things happening. Did you follow this at all? Like what are your thoughts?
A bit. It's so weird as like just a gamer and someone who just, you know, is familiar intimately with like the landscape, like things that to me are kind of just like gut notions or senses or feelings or knowledge, like seeing them kind of laid out in legalese is so weird. Because like it's things like that even I necessarily couldn't like put into words, but it's just like, you know, you got a gut feeling about certain things. It's funny to me reading like Call of Duty is just like that comes up that like the whole, it feels like the case is literally about Call of Duty,
it does. And the CMA did not, like, that's why I loved about the CMA's decision was that it was not the decision. The document was not about Call of Duty. It was about it was about like it was about cloud gaming and Game Pass. It's
funny to me because like obviously Call of Duty is huge. Like we know that, we've seen the numbers. It's a huge franchise, you know, big numbers. But it's funny for me as someone who like, you know, I like Call of Duty fine, but I don't really play it at all.
No, so, I know what you mean. It's like it makes you laugh when you see it.
Yeah, because like seeing like the
Bloomberg's headlines.
Yeah, talking about Call of Duty, and I'm just like, who gives a shit? But you know, obviously, like that's the whole thing. Tons of people, millions of people give a crap. But it's just like it's so funny to keep reading that, like, oh, like don't worry, like Call of Duty will be on PlayStation for another like 10 years, and I'm just like, they have so much other stuff. They have so many other IPs. They have so many other companies under there. Like it's so much more than just Call of Duty. But obviously, that's the biggest. That's the flagship IP in many ways, and like the biggest moneymaker. But it's so funny to me because I'm like, I would love to see this whole conversation like without Call of Duty even being in, you know, the name being called upon. But
like let's just talk about how much of the industry they will consume. Like that to me seems more logical. But I think the reason why you see Call of Duty come up so much is because like you said, it's the biggest moneymaker. So I think it's like the biggest tent pole that you can
Yeah.
bring out as an argument.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
the
they're,
easiest one to be like, look how much this is worth, that they will just suck out of the industry entirely for
yeah.
themselves if they have it as a first party title. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's why you see it come up so much,
hmm And
because
there
it's
have
just
been
like
like
it's the
lots
easiest
of,
argument to get behind.
yeah, there've been lots of deals done around Call of Duty in the past too. Like it's kind of been the, it's like the tug of war, you know, like it's the flag in the middle and like everybody kind of pulls it a little bit closer one generation, pulls it a little bit closer to their side on the next one, where it's just like, oh, you know, like
Yeah,
Sony had like a deal to kind of get a little more stuff in COD in this version, and then Microsoft had that, and like it's like kind of always being, it's similar to how like Destiny 2, you know, before Sony even purchased Bungie, which was a whole other can of worms. Like they had all this
yeah,
kind of these deals to get, you know, additional content, early access to things on PlayStation. And I feel like Call of Duty's
yeah,
kind of had that happen as well in different ways. So I think they've used that as an example to be like, oh, well, you know, Sony isn't acting in good faith because they did deals with Call of Duty in the past, or Microsoft isn't acting in good faith because like
yeah.
XYZ, you know, that kind of thing.
No, yeah, totally.
It's just so funny. It's Call of Duty, man.
It's
I'm
Call of
like,
Duty.
it's Call of Duty.
Like you almost expect them to like, well, Judge, the prosecutor here couldn't even average a 1.0 KD, so I don't know why he's even allowed to
It just feels like we're listening to a bunch of like, you know, just bros talking about COD
it's so
in
stupid.
like, you know, the Federal Trade Commission court. It's just so wild to me.
So you know, this happened, so they kind of won the right to, that headline's a little misleading, they kind of won the right to acquire Activision.
hmm
The anti trust lawsuit will still happen if the deal closes. It looks like the CMA might even reverse their decision, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, there's some stuff
And
with them spinning off like
is
cloud
there what?
stuff to be like UK owned or something like that.
Yes, yeah. So, or it seems like they might close it with the like, with the understanding of like, we'll restructure this to make it work for
Yeah, yeah.
what the CMA wants. So FTC did file the appeal. So as of, we're recording this episode a little late this week. We still haven't heard. We still haven't heard from the court. I think it's the Ninth District in New York, which is, I don't know why that
Dude,
court is like
home
behind
base,
everything.
baby.
Yeah, the court is behind everything. I
Can't
wish
get
I
enough.
understood it more. So they filed. So the Federal Trade Commission on Thursday filed its appeal of a federal judge's decision earlier this week, allowing Microsoft to close its $69 billion merger with Activision Blizzard.
Nice.
The legal filing comes after FTC's failed effort to block the deal over allegations that the merger would harm competition by giving Microsoft exclusive control over a major video game title such as Call of Duty. U.S. District Judge
Thanks,
Jacqueline
CNN.
Scott Corley said Tuesday she will not block Microsoft from closing the deal as the FTC had asked. So, well, we just got to wait and see now. I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, I
Yeah,
think
this
Microsoft
there's
still has
just
a lot
been
of hurdles to get over before
so
they
much
can have
hurry up
this.
and wait, man, with this. It's
Yeah.
just it's been nuts, just constant, absolutely constant.
Yeah,
But it's
look
a
at
big
this.
deal, you know.
Listen to the judge's decision right here. On Tuesday, Corley wrote in her opinion that the U.S. government had not shown it is likely to succeed on its assertion the combined firm will probably pull Call of Duty from Sony PlayStation, or that its ownership of Activision content will substantially lessen competition in the video game library subscription and cloud gaming markets. Which I
Yeah,
don't know. I think the FTC did a bad job like arguing that,
yeah.
but it's
It's
so strange that like will the combined firm will probably pull Call of Duty from Sony PlayStation. Like, why is that even I don't even think that should be like something we're arguing about. It
yeah,
just seems like so much more to me.
yeah. It's like I said before, just the gut feeling, and I'm realizing now, like the more this goes on, like how hard it is to really like legislate uh, feelings, you know, and things that like you just know, ethics, like
Right.
to legislate ethics.
Yeah, ethics don't exist.
Where it's like for this, it's like yeah, they're doing like the real nitty gritty of like, oh, this franchise on this platform, this and that. And I'm like, for me, the bigger picture is just like the whole, the precedent that this would set. Like we're seeing so much conglomeration
Yeah,
of these
exactly.
entertainment companies. And it's like,
Yep.
you know that so many other companies are watching this case with bated breath right now, because like if it goes
They want to
through,
see what they can get away with.
they want to see what they can get away with. And
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, man, but like Microsoft can make all the promises they want. We've seen time and time again, at least in America, like corporations get away with a ton of things. Like if they just say like, oh, don't worry, we'll keep it on there for 10 years. Like who's going to sue them if they don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. The FTC.
um, yeah, the FTC, and they're doing a great job. It's like, it's just so many companies I think are watching this. They really are, to be like, if they go through with this, then it's basically says like, oh, we can pitch things the same way. We can buy out other companies too, and we can also become a mega corporation. Disney would be watching if they hadn't already done it. Gotten away with it.
Exactly.
So,
I
yeah.
I basically like I've seen a lot of like, oh well, whatever. I don't care about this. Like, Activision already screws us over. Microsoft already screws us over. So like, whatever. Who cares? But it's like it's it's about exactly what you just said. It's about the consolidation of the industry
Yeah.
into mega companies that have no interest in protecting the art form
Mm-hmm.
or doing right by the consumer. So if we give all that power to one place, then we're just guaranteeing that it will be bad forever, as
Yeah.
opposed to doing the opposite, where we should try and encourage competition where they're actually being
Yeah.
forced to appreciate or respect the consumer.
For sure. I mean, tangentially related, we're seeing that happen right now with the WGA SAG AFTRA combined strike, which just blew up this week. Um,
Yeah.
of
and
of
and
just
and things like this
Mhm.
will lead to more, I think will lead to just more labor problems,
Yeah.
like that. Because if you take away the more employers you take away, the less options those people have to work in the field,
Yeah.
and they're just going to be subject to whatever those working conditions are between the
Hmm.
three companies that exist at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And like, if the way I also look at it is that, yeah, there's different degrees in corporations of like hands on, hands off with how people let things run. But like at the end of the day, like if Microsoft owns Activision Blizzard King, like they have the final say over everything
Pop
fundamentally.
off, King.
People always forget about King, baby. They make billions of dollars too. They got Candy Crush. It's huge. That's insane. That's like
I
the
know.
mobile game market. Anyway,
They did bring that up. Like, they were saying like that is understated. King is very understated.
people
Like,
forget they're talking about Call of
Microsoft
Duty.
wanted Zynga or whatever, Zynga,
Yeah.
like really bad. Like they want King. People don't
Yeah.
bring King up, but they want that.
They want it. That is easy money. That's basically free money.
That could be the one they want most. Like, I'm not even
Yeah.
joking.
Honestly, yeah. Like that stuff runs itself at this point. Like, people, it's an incredibly lucrative market. Like, games are far cheaper to produce in the mobile platforms. It's like, if you got that business, like they can just make a new Candy Crush spinoff every year. They're probably, I don't know the numbers, they're probably making like billions of dollars off that game alone. But Microsoft would own all of these things, and at the end of the day they have the final say. And like you said, like if, let's say, there's like three giant corporations that own everything, like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like that's what kind of freedom is that truly? When like you have a problem, the chain of command just goes up to the head honchos at Microsoft. It's like that corporate culture trickles down, problems go up. It's like, I don't know, it's, if Microsoft is like, turns out to be the best place on the planet for Activision Blizzard King, and like they do a really great job of curating it, cool. But if they're also horrible, then that
Yeah.
will trickle down as well. It's like, then there's and you
Yeah.
can't really like spin off once this happens. Like once the acquisition is made, it's like it can't really go back to being independent. It just
What
doesn't
is
really happen that way.
the incentive is always how much money they'll make, how
Yeah.
they can report to their shareholders, right?
Yeah.
The only way to actually, really, the word to use is force these companies to do things creatively, as opposed to purely thinking about the dollar, is by having competition where they have to do things creatively to
Yeah.
bring in customers.
Yeah.
So whether that's making games more creatively or whatever art form you're in, that's the only way to do it. Look at how bad Disney has gotten, like how bad the quality of their projects have gotten since they
Yeah.
acquired Fox.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Mhm.
And now we see these movies are tanking. And look, and in the gaming industry, look at the live service games. Like, look at the live service games tanking.
Yeah.
Like, we see more live service games go into effect with more consolidation in the industry, I think.
Yeah. You also see companies cannibalize their own products, which is also really wild as well. You saw that happen with Disney and Pixar. Still happens all the time. Like Disney, when they they acquired Pixar, Disney Animation and Pixar are different. They're different things. They put out different movies, and like Pixar still has a lot of creative control, quote unquote, but like Disney like very specifically like doesn't push their movies as much. They like they don't distribute them as widely. They don't put as much money into advertising as say they do with something like Frozen 2, which is,
Right.
their original. So it's like it depends on the control, the people who have control over which projects. It could be something like, when if Microsoft owns this, they could say like, well, I mean, I'm not saying that like it would be a tragedy if Call of Duty disappeared, but like personally, if they were like, oh, well, we want Halo to be like the big shooter. So like they can basically kind of like de-incentivize or like de-emphasize like development of Call of Duty. They can like mess with it all they want. And then you
Yeah,
wind up with like two
exactly.
products that would normally be competing to make each other better. Suddenly it's like they don't have
Or
to.
what's more likely is that they just stop caring about Halo.
Yeah, that's at this point, you're right. That's probably
Yeah.
more likely is the alternative, that version.
Which like it's not looking good right now.
Yeah.
It's really not looking good.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
like,
think
oh, well, now
that is that is
yeah.
such a good example to me of like why I don't want them to have more.
Yeah. We
That's
own Call
actually a
of Duty.
really
That'll
great.
make,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
that prints
really
money.
great example. If
Yeah.
they have Call of Duty, why should they care about Halo? They
Yeah.
shouldn't, honestly.
Dollar signs. You could
They
say,
really
like,
shouldn't.
you could say, and we will say very passionately and full throatedly, like, for the art, for the sake of making good games. And like, Halo's an awesome franchise, man. And it's
Yeah.
like, but to the people who are in charge there, it's like, it's just a product. It's software, it's a product. And if one is printing billions of dollars and the other is like stopping and starting,
Yep.
really kind of like, and again, like not you, we could say like, well, just put people who are really passionate about it on the project, but like they're not looking at it that way. They're just looking at like the money,
They're looking at the
and
money.
so they can
Yep.
say like, oh, well, then
That's
Halo,
like
maybe they'll just,
a really like good question. I feel like if Microsoft had Call of Duty, why should they care about Halo?
yeah,
That's a
they
really
might
good way to
just
look at it. They might not.
maybe
They really
maybe
shouldn't.
make
They really
Halo
shouldn't
Wars
care.
2. I don't know, Halo Wars 3.
It's just
That,
like
that kind of,
yeah, like going back to it. They only care about their quarterly report. And the
mm-hmm.
only way to like drive and increase like the gain of customers is by being creative, like in doing that in creative ways when you have competition or you have no competition.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like if
yeah,
there's no competition, you're the only thing, you buy everything out, that's one way. Or you have to be, creative and competitive with other places to actually like
yeah,
top what your competitors are doing.
yeah.
And you do, and so it's funny because even when you're being creative in that way, you have money on the mind. Like it's still about the dollar.
Yeah,
It's, but at least in that way, a creative culture is being fostered to
mm-hmm.
drive the business, not
Yeah,
the business driving what the creative should be.
yeah. To play the advocate also for the other side too, and again, because right now we're talking about Microsoft's acquisition, like Sony purchasing Bungie, and all of their like very very deep knowledge of live service stuff, like very psychological game development, um, they own that now too. So it's like, whereas Sony might have previously, I don't know, like some of their live service games or multiplayer stuff that they were working on to say like, oh well, this is like to compete with Destiny. Now it's like, when we saw it happen, quote unquote, like allegedly, like Bungie had people go in and look at some of their projects at Sony and basically say like, this isn't really going to like, it's not going to pull numbers, it's not going to make as much money as we think. So like, and Sony says, okay,
Yeah.
well, Destiny is pulling in billions of dollars, so like whatever, we don't need to create that.
Right.
And it's like,
Shut
projects
it
die
down.
that way. Like really cool things don't get made, or get made and then get de-incentivized and shut down. And it's like, I don't know, man, just competition breeds great stuff. And I hate seeing all these companies just buying each other out. It's wild.
100%. I think that's why it's funny that like this merger and the writer and SAG after strike, the WGA SAG after strike are all happening at once, because it really feels like a battle for, are we going to just allow monopolies to control
for humanity
the government,
in art,
control
like,
creative, like
yeah,
it feels like this is like a big moment in both of those ways.
it really does. And like, there's a lot of people who are just like,
There's a lot of corporate apologists. I've been seeing a lot of corporate apologists
really
in my
are.
Twitch chat on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna get some hate from people. I heard you call me a corporate apologist. Don't be a corporate apologist. Like I don't. Why are you like, whatever. Like, yeah, like let Microsoft have Call of Duty. I like Xbox. Like,
Yeah.
stop it. Like anything, any multi-billion-dollar company that's trying to do something, you should want the opposite to probably happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing with
By
the
default,
current.
even if it's a company you love.
Yeah, the current strike is basically being done, and I say this, as an actor, I'm a member of SAG AFTRA. I would be out picketing if I lived closer. Um, like these companies have conglomerated so much control in the way that they produce, maintain, and distribute their content that like the contracts are outdated for actors, for writers, for creative people, and these companies have complete control over it, and they basically are like pumping up the budgets, paying themselves out through it, and like not basically paying as little as humanly possible to actors and writers and creative people. And it's like they will continue to get away with this. Like nothing is stopping them except for organized labor that can actually
Right.
try and shut it down to make a difference. That's why I think we need to see more unionization in gaming as well. Like
Yeah.
really, because people just get used and abused in the industry.
Yeah. The quote of we're just gonna let the writers lose their houses and apartments before we start negotiating with them.
Yeah, like it's a
And
necessary
saying
evil.
that the
Like,
actors and
what?
writers are being unreasonable. This is Bob Iger is speaking for every multi-billion-dollar corporation, not even just
Yeah,
in the entertainment industry. That is how they all think. They
yeah,
don't care, and that is exactly why you should not be a corporate apologist or care about like something good happening for a company of that size. It does not. They do not have the interest of you in mind ever, ever.
no.
They don't care. So that's enough of that, dude. Let's get to the real news.
Yeah.
All right, you can read this one off for us here. Hold on. Here we go.
Oh yeah, it's time for the real stuff. Baldur's Gate 3 leaps up Steam charts after bare sex reveal.
This was the news of the
This
week. Like
this really was the
unironically.
news of the week, man. This blew up. Like the guys at Larian are out of control. Someone needs to stop them.
All right,
this
so
game can't come out.
clarifying the scene because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's like not actually a bear, but it kind of is.
Yeah, so basically they did a big like 7.5 hour like pre-release kind of stream event where they
This
touched
game is
base with a lot
insane.
of.
Like, are you are you gonna like replace your D&D nights with this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
this seems like a
it's
game that you can only play like once a week because there's so much, and like you play for like 4 hours once a week and just play it forever.
yeah, I can't wait to see this, man. Like I'm so excited for this game. But so they did this pre-release thing where they showed off a few more details, some new things for the release, a lot of Q&A kind of stuff with fans. There was a live audience, which is really fun, and that's where some of the viral clips of this came out. And so I believe the context was like the interesting thing about this, the production of this game, is that they ask themselves questions all the time, but they also ask the player base because it's been in early access for like 2 years or something now at this point, maybe longer. So the entire way they have had people, fans, of the genre and of the game, like playing, giving their feedback. They ask them things, and someone I think was like, "So you're putting in like romance scenes. There's romance options," and they were like, "What if my player character is a druid?" And they're like, "Yes, you can romance people." And they're like, "But I can also shapeshift. So like, what if I shapeshift into a bear before like having a romantic scene with someone?" And they were like, "Well, we thought about that, and we realized, well, yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping you." So
So
then they play a
that was
clip
the
of
question, and then they had that ready to roll.
basically, yeah,
That had to
saying
have been
like this
planned,
is
dude. There's
yeah,
no
like this
shot.
this is what we're thinking about, that kind of thing. And that just goes to show like there's a lot of games that kind of pitch dynamic gameplay, dynamic features and stuff like that, and a lot of it's hot air, but
Cyberpunk.
yeah, Cyberpunk for starters. But like
Yeah.
Larian's kind of the real deal. Like Divinity Original Sin 2, which is a great game. That was their previous release, which this is kind of like grown out of and turned into an even bigger deal. Like that game really did have like so many possible ways of like solving things, of interacting with the dialogue trees to like push the story forward in very, very unique or organic ways. And this seems like they've taken that to like the the nth degree,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
sort of stuff like that. Because I've watched some interviews too where they were just like, yeah, we thought too, like, well, if you're playing like a barbarian, one of their things is throwing. They throw stuff a lot. They were like, well, how much weight could they actually throw? And they're like, well, if one of your party members is a halfling, they could probably throw a halfling. So you can throw like other players
That's
and other characters of
incredible.
like a certain weight, like all those sorts of
I'm
things too.
stoked to play it. I mean, I know
Yeah,
a lot of people like that we talked to about it, like they want to do the solo player. I'm kind of like I'm ready to just do co-op off the bat.
sure.
Probably because like it just feels like a have a party with you kind of game. But like,
Yeah, I mean, it is a
but
D&D
I hope we
campaign.
can blast through. Well, yeah, that's the thing I'm excited to see. Like, I don't really understand. Like,
Hmm.
you can do like it's one long campaign, or like there's like co-op like side campaigns you can do with like people, or
Yeah, I'm
like
curious about that as well. Like
yeah.
this it's so fun to see this too. Is really a return to form, I think,
Let me
for this
swap over this one
genre.
too here. Hold on a second.
Sure. In so many ways, like back in the day, like early 2000s to mid 2000s, we had some great PC RPGs like this that were kind of based on D&D rule sets. There was the original Baldur's Gate games, Neverwinter Nights, a franchise that had a similar
Oh,
thing, and they
Neverwinter Nights was like I played Neverwinter Nights. That was like a D&D
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of sandbox.
yes,
Oh, I
very
didn't realize
similar.
that, but it's an MMO, right?
I think they had an online one, but originally
Okay,
they were
I think
just
I
kind of like offline,
gotcha.
yeah, like CRPGs like this. And in a lot of ways, they kind of wound up being like platforms for digital D&D that people like made mod campaigns for, made homebrew stuff, like big creative scenes around it, because it was
Yeah,
like, very polished software that could kind of recreate these things. And they released like great tool sets for it, mod sets. And I would really love to see that happen with this, where like this is
I have
kind
a
of,
feeling it will.
yeah, like the platform where you can like, go to nexusmods.com and download, like a homebrew campaign for Baldur's Gate 3 that you can play with your friends. Like,
Do you think this will end up being like a Skyrim where it like legitimately has like 20 years of legs?
that's a great question. I mean, I haven't, again, this has been in early access for a long time, so I'm sure you could, look up the impressions, but I'm trying to keep it as fresh. I haven't played it. So honestly, it's hard to say. I don't
Yeah,
know. I think it certainly could be. I'm
it'll be
curious
really
about the same
cool.
thing too, where like,
It,
is
it
it,
sucks that it won't win Game of the Year over Exoprimal though. I have it
it's the,
downloaded. I might play it tonight.
oh yeah, I have it downloaded too. Let's check it out.
I'd be down. But yeah, so you play D&D. You love
Yeah.
D&D.
Yeah. I'm a
So
fan. This,
coming as a
it,
D&D player, how excited are you? Like, what are your thoughts as from a D&D standpoint?
I genuinely wonder. I think as someone who like has played games, especially role playing games and turn based stuff my whole life, and only got into D&D itself relatively recently, one of the big differences is like combat and the way you level up and how you actually like approach
Yeah.
encounters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm actually really curious to see how they translate, because like they've customized it a bit, but at the end of the day, like this is really an adaptation of like the current D&D rule set. Um, and there's some stuff that like I think works great when you're playing with friends and you can kind of like improvise, you can bend the rules a little bit, but like in a digital sense, like I worry slightly that like the rule set might wind up being like too restrictive, but a lot of the
Interesting.
freedom and the fun comes from, again, improvising and like
Yeah.
using dialogue to solve problems, or saying
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
rather than like
Interesting.
shooting a bolt of energy at this guy, like I look up at the ceiling with perception, like, do I see anything above his head? And it's like, oh, maybe there's a winch in a barrel. And
Right.
like, oh, I'll do that instead, that kind of
How
thing.
D&D will the game make it? Like, how much of a D&D feel will it have? Like,
Yeah, and these previews are saying, like the headline article right here, the closest we've come to a full simulation of D&D, and it seems like they've really considered all the
will
possibilities.
there be like will there literally be like dice mechanics in this, do you think, or like some kind of like randomizer
I
to do those
assume
type of things that you're saying?
there might be some like, what's the word for it, like granularity in terms of like how strict it is. You might be able to like do some auto rolls or something like that, but I assume they're probably doing a full dice system under the hood. That would be my assumption.
It's pretty cool.
um yeah, which is fun. It's fun and it's awful at the same time, because sometimes you get bad rolls and terrible
Yeah,
things
but
happen, but that's also where
that's
the
the
fun,
thing. That's the whole point, right?
yeah, you got to roll with it.
You got to roll with it. Hey.
Yeah. So like it's so interesting. I think this is really going to be exciting for a lot of people, because like they've clearly put a ton of work. There's, what did they say, like 170 hours of like
Cutscenes,
cutscenes or
right?
something
Yeah,
like that, like
and
ridiculous
only one
numbers.
that matters:
The bear scene.
the bear scene.
Um, and like, so clearly there's going to be a ton of story, a ton of dialogue trees and stuff like that. I think what's really going to surprise a lot of people who don't have like the experience with it is just how, the moment to moment gameplay works, and like the D&D stuff. Like I'm just so excited to see how they did it and how it can work dynamically with co-op, with playing solo, with
Yeah,
making your own character versus choosing a character that they've made that has kind of a pre-existing background. Like, It's wild. I can't believe this is actually like about to come out too. And something about this that I find really cool, like we're having these big discussions about, so many AAA companies that are spending, hundreds of millions of dollars on games that are so either releasing in broken states or like beholden to the demands of, executives, and they're thinking about profits and stuff. And like Larian's a company, obviously they want to make money off of this, but like they took the time to build this, to approach it exactly the way they wanted to. And they delayed it, they moved it around, they did this and that with the release date. And then the PC release, they moved it back up actually, because they were like,
I did see that.
Yeah, they were like, it's pretty much done.
Yeah,
and they were like, and they specifically said in their release too, they were like, well, one, we're doing this because like that's a busy section of releases, and like, we want it to do better, obviously, but two, like we know you're going to be strapped for time to play games, so like we want you to have more time to play it and like not feel guilty. So they're like, yeah, just push it out early. And like they have the ability to do that, which is super cool. Other companies might be like, oh no, but it has to come out during like, Q3 at the end of this and that. Yeah. Otherwise, like,
in this
but they're
window,
like, yeah, they're like, it doesn't matter. It's going to sell regardless. Like, it's our only game.
That's awesome. No, that's super cool.
It's fun to see.
It'll be exciting. I think this is like a game of the year like sleeper, honestly.
For sure.
It'll be cool to see like what the game ends up being. Like, I mean, it's been in early access, so I feel like people already know. But like,
that's the thing about the production that I think the development process is so interesting, because like again, like I've intentionally not looked stuff up, so like so many of these things are unknown to me. But like they've literally had people playing it for years, so it's like they basically could say like if they try something and the player base thinks it sucks, they're not going to release it that way. They're going to workshop it to make it better. So it's like, it's basically been like a play that's been in like, a workshop form.
It's a sequel to like such a cult game that like you're guaranteed getting like people who have so much experience with the first one or two that are giving you like probably like mostly credible feedback. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I think the people playing this game in early access are like probably the most passionate fans you could possibly have of this genre, of this franchise, of Larian, the company, because Divinity rocks. It's a great game.
No, it's super, super cool. I'm excited for this one. I think it's like a game of the year contender, sleeper, just because it's like, it has had so much work done on it. It is, I think it's going to feel very unique because of what it's trying to replicate in this, like the D&D sandbox thing.
Yeah.
So we'll say like, it's a cool year for games.
And there's some wacky stuff with, the bear sex and lots of other things like that. It's so funny to me that blew up, because everybody, the second people heard that or read that, they like, everybody knew.
Knows what Baldur's Gate 3 is now. And I think we kind of glossed over it in that article, but I think it made the like, I don't think that's why the Steam sales like skyrocketed afterwards, but it definitely didn't hurt. It definitely didn't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, people love that kind of thing. Like whether you're a fan of like very crunchy RPGs, or you're someone who like, just played a lot of Skyrim, and like that's your experience with RPGs. Like people associate like that kind of just creative freedom and like improvisation with like just fun, goofy stuff. Like a lot of people just buy like one game and they play it forever. And for some people, they might be like, oh man, like this looks like Skyrim, man. Like, I don't know. And, they wind up doing that and playing it for like 500 hours. Who knows?
Yeah. We'll see. It'll be cool. I hope we can all play it together soon. All right, let's check out this real quick. This is a really wild article from this week, or piece of news. It wasn't really an article. And funny enough, I don't think I've seen many people reporting on it, which I think I think it says a lot of things.
This is near and dear to my heart, man.
This is interesting. The Video Game History Foundation, they came out, they actually commissioned a study on their own, where they essentially wanted to look into game preservation, and they wanted to see what percentage of games before 2010, created before 2010, were preserved and commercially available to consumers I think that's what they mean when they say preserved. Like they're
Yeah.
commercially available to the consumer to purchase and play without requiring them to have the original hardware to play it.
Hmm.
So like, like a random Nintendo game or like a Game Boy game, can you buy that on the Switch? Can you buy, or like even like the Wii U, you could, for example, or the DS, you could.
Yeah.
But do you need like the original hardware? Is it commercially accessible to you? Can you buy it today? All on first party markets, first hand markets. Um, so in their findings of the study, they found that 87% of classic
Every
games, again,
game.
that's any game before 2010,
Yeah. Ever.
are not commercially available to the consumer. So 87% missing, the disappearance of classic video games. New study reveals most classic video games are completely unavailable. The Video Game History Foundation, in partnership with the Software Preservation Network, has conducted the first ever study on the commercial availability of classic video games, and the results are bleak. 87% of classic video games released in the United States are critically endangered. The example they use here is, imagine if the only way to watch Titanic was to find a used VHS tape and maintain your own vintage equipment so you could still watch it. And what if no library, not even the Library of Congress, could do any better? They could keep and digitize that VHS of Titanic, but you'd have to go all the way there to watch it. Sounds crazy, but that's the reality we live in with video games, a $180 billion industry, while the game and their history disappear. So this is crazy. And
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this?
This is something that I've known instinctually, and I think a lot of people have, but seeing like an actual number put to it, I think is really alarming
Yeah.
and really upsetting, because fundamentally, to me, it's kind of like I was saying before, like legislating ethics and just like what feels right and what feels wrong. Like art and the preservation of it is incredibly important. Like the fact that these things are just basically gone is like, I mean, there is no comparison. Like, I guess you could, like they were saying there, like the example of, like an old movie or a book or something like that. Like those are things that are easier to preserve and have like legislation that's kind of been passed to like allow those things to be preserved in better ways. And like games have been basically like unregulated in that way. And they're just, there's a lot of crap. Like you could say that throughout the history of video games, maybe like 9 out of 10 games aren't that great, or like
Right.
nothing that people would really want to go back and play. But
it's
that's
about
not
preservation of media and art.
Precisely. Media and art, everything has a purpose. Everything is a creative effort that,
Right.
tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people worked on. And if we don't preserve that history, we lose things as a result. And games are so unique in that way, because like we're seeing this more and more, like time goes on. Like it's crazy to think that like, 2000, the year 2000 was 23 years ago at this point, 23 and a half.
Right.
And like these things degrade over time. Like they're, again, like with movies, you can get a digital file of a movie, a DVD, a VHS. Like there's multiple ways to kind of like play a visual thing. Whereas with a game, it's like, basically most of them existed on like, a disc or a cartridge that only could be played on that hardware, that bespoke hardware. And it's, those things are deteriorating. Even if you're someone who spends hundreds of dollars to collect like cartridges of N64 games, like those are deteriorating. They're literally deteriorating over time. Like the actual physical media is not withstanding the test of time. So there needs to either be a commercial way to purchase and play and collect those things, or
Right.
I don't even like to use the word piracy, because like
Yeah.
it is preservation. Like if you actually, the people who put the work into like get those files, create ways to emulate them that matches the original hardware or surpasses or whatever you want, and then like actually document and archive them. Like that is unbelievable work. And there's a thing in here where they basically say like some of the people that are like representing these companies, like Nintendo or Sony, any of them that have been around for like this long, they say like, oh, any efforts to archive these things will hurt our bottom line. So like they're fighting against it. They're fighting against preservation.
Actually, I don't know if you click this link in there. There's a link to another article, which I'll switch over to. And I was reading through this earlier. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
in that article from the gamehistory.org, the Video Game History Foundation, they directly link to an example of lobbying against this sort of preservation.
Mhm.
So it even says here down here that there's a fear of an online arcade. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Yeah, fear of an online arcade. So our good old boys at Nintendo. So it says this whole article is about like the preservationists were like devastated when the eShop was going offline because it's
Yeah,
thousands of games that like
so
just
many
are no
things
longer
completely
commercially
gone.
accessible. So fear of an online arcade. Beyond stopping consumers from purchasing digital 3DS and Wii U games, the VGHF says Nintendo is, and that's the Video Game History Foundation that did the study, whose article we were just looking at, says Nintendo is also helping to stop this kind of easy research access to archival copies. As a member of the Entertainment Software Association, which I believe is the lobbying group that is referenced,
Hmm.
Nintendo actively funds lobbying that prevents even libraries from being able to provide legal access to these games. Says the VJHF, or the VJHF said, not providing commercial access is understandable, but preventing institutional work to preserve these titles on top of that is actively destructive to video game history. Indeed, the ESA was one of the main groups arguing against a DMCA exemption for offsite access to library games, access to library game archives during wide-ranging arguments in front of the U.S. Copyright Office in 2021. During those arguments, ESA lawyer Steve England expressed the industry lobbying group's concerns that the exemption as proposed would allow the library to put emulated games up online for public audience with no meaningful access restrictions. So, like, basically, they're worried that like archiving games will lead to like one massive like online accessible streaming library, I guess, which is
Yeah,
like so weird to me, and I don't know why they ever think that would happen.
yeah,
This to me like seems like some weird, and I think they use Nintendo here because like Nintendo is like the one who just shut down the eShop. That's what this article
yeah.
is
And
about.
they've always been very, very against Nintendo. Even their official stance is that even a copy that you legally own of a game, they think you should not be able to even like back it up for your own
Yeah,
personal
or
use.
put it on or take the files and put them on your computer.
Precisely, they
Yeah.
consider that to be like a breach of whatever, which is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think this is ridiculous too. The only thing that I don't fully agree with is like the I think the Titanic example is good, but I think like I don't necessarily agree that there should be some kind of like free open access
Hmm.
like collection of games that people can just like play whatever they want whenever they want directly through some like archival servers somewhere. If there's like some kind of like subscription and like the all like you base on what games get played, like the owners of the IP get like a cut of what's being played based on the subscriptions and stuff. I'm like, yeah, sure, like why not? But like I do think it's absolutely insane to lobby against preservation efforts for an art form, for a
Yeah,
media form. That just makes
yeah.
no sense. That'd be
No,
like saying the Criterion collection can't exist.
yeah, no, I agree completely. It's like, again, like I was saying, there's a lot of crappy games, but there's a lot of crappy movies from, like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s that are at this point incredibly important historical pieces of the industry, of the world at large when they were made. And like someone wants to watch those. Someone will watch those and it will enrich their life or it
Yeah.
will enrich culture as a whole to be around. And I think the same thing is with games. And like you said, I mean, it's a tricky line because like if anybody can go online and get something for free that like is an intellectual property that's owned, then like that's iffy. But like on the flip side of that is then like I think there's an ethical duty for these companies to provide some way for them to be accessed. Like
Yeah,
whether you
100%.
can
Yeah.
purchase the software with a license or you can purchase it DRM free to just have it yourself and not distribute. Like there has to be some way to do that because like I've said this before in a previous episode. Like I love Nintendo and I love their games. Like I grew up with them, they're fantastic. But like I personally find it very offensive the way that they act about people who want to preserve and emulate their games because I think the reason that they are as beloved and well known as they are, and the reason so many of these franchises still have legs, is because they've stayed in the public eye. They're people who
Right.
have played these games for decades now on emulation,
Right.
on emulated machines. And I think that keeps it alive. Like if you wanted to play Ocarina of Time, like they've re-released it a few times, which is great. They had it on like the virtual console, all that sort of thing. But like if you wanted to play like the original version of the game, you basically can't. It's like you have to have a working N64 and that cartridge. And that is an absurd ask for most people, where that is Ocarina of
Right.
Time. I use this as an example. That is a cultural touchstone. It's a game design and development touchstone. That is a game that I think should be available to everybody in perpetuity for the next 200 years, because like that is a game that is important for people to play, that can
Right.
inspire them, and that can, who knows what effects it can have. And if that's basically locked down to either, there has to be some way to access those things. Like you can emulate it, and you can emulate it in a way that basically recreates the original hardware experience, which I think is remarkable. And that should be done professionally. That should be available. That should be available to consumers, and not have them feel like,
100%.
I don't know.
And
It's a soapbox thing for me, because
people-
I love this art form.
People are doing research on these games, they're writing college papers on these games. Like these games are, like you said, they're art forms. It's media studies at this point. Like they are part of the culture. They are part of something that is continuously growing, has been growing for 40, 50 years.
Mhm.
And like this quote right here, right now, if a researcher wants to study an out-of-release 50-hour-long RPG at a library, might have to book days or even weeks of travel, lodging, research, leave, and childcare. Like that's insane.
Yeah, that's a good
insane.
point.
And like,
Yeah.
again, like, do I think they should have access to this game like whenever they want, cost free? No, like I don't think so. Like, I think the IPs, whoever owns those IPs, are in charge of the publishing. Whoever owns the copyright, they should like you said. It's just I think it's a duty of them to have that available for them.
Mhm.
Not necessarily for free. I don't think anybody's arguing that.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. I don't know why they're going on the offensive with this like non-argument of something that nobody's asking for.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like the statement of like, oh, any efforts to archive this will hurt our bottom line, I think is insane, because like
Insane.
if there is actual in the way that, like, we have the Library of Congress, which like collects important media things like, books, movies, and stuff like that, and they reference it there in the study, like some way for, I mean, like, again, like the emulation exists, people do it. It's like, if that can be funded or something in a way that like this software can be archived and held in like libraries or research institutions, and you can like loan it out, like, for God's sake, like if I want to go to a library either through the internet or in person and say like, I want to play the original Final Fantasy IX from the PlayStation 1, like how amazing would it be if there was like an actual, like, the emulators exist, but like it was supported legally to say like, okay, here's software you can play it on, and here is the game itself, and like you're loaning it out. There's like a deal being done to where like it's all above board, and you can play it, you can enjoy it, you can write a paper on it, you can study it for your own stuff, you can have your kids play it. Like that's the way I think it should be at the very least. But like these companies will fight tooth and nail to stop that from ever being a thing, because they can say, oh well, we can re-release that game maybe 10 years from now for like, $30, and people will have to pay it if they want to play it legally.
Yeah. They want like, yeah. It's interesting because legally they have like the right to do whatever they want with the property, but it's like like you're saying, it's an ethical standard that art should be upheld to for preservation.
Yeah.
And I think it's something even that like luckily we have like film archivals that do this, but like those media companies are also pretty disgusting about it as of late too, like pulling things off streamers incredibly quickly. Like new movies are getting pulled within like a month or two. Like the Pink Ladies show, like I pulled it in like 6 weeks.
That's
like,
so sad.
I don't even know if they aired the final episodes. Like I think maybe they did. I don't know, but it's like it got pulled immediately. Stuff like that. It's just scary, and I think it goes into again like the control of these massive companies. Are we going to let the monopolies just decide what parts of culture we get to enjoy and when those things can exist? That's insane. Once you put something into the zeitgeist of culture, there is a domain that it now exists in, and people have a right to experience it. So if you don't want to give people a commercial and legal way to do that, then you're just going to like the companies that created emulation culture. No, the people that created emulation culture are the companies.
Mm-hmm.
The companies created emulation culture.
Yeah, essentially by like saying that, the knowledge that this is so locked down, like people created their own ways to continue playing and enjoying these things. And like
Yeah.
an argument would also be like, oh, well, like obviously the people at these companies are super passionate about it too. Like if they had their way, like of course they would want it to be re-released, but like game companies are, ships of Theseus. Like they're constantly, developers come and go from these things constantly. So like the team that made, let's use Final Fantasy IX as an example. The team that made that, I'm sure some of them are still at Square Enix, especially knowing Japanese work culture, they might still be there. But like a lot of them probably aren't. The team that made that game is not that team anymore. So like there have been examples of like companies losing source codes for losing assets from these games, like losing the actual physical files of these games.
Right.
And the only reason that they are still around is because of preservationists.
Right.
Like this has happened multiple times. And it's like these companies, you might say like, oh, well, the team that made it is, passionate, but it's like the company is not the team, the company is the company. And like, they don't have any obligation to maintain these things. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree. It's crazy. It's just, again, we're in this moment where it's like, what are we going to let big companies get away with? What are we going to let them determine?
Yeah, it feels that way.
Are they going to let them determine what we can experience, especially when something's released to us and part of culture?
Yeah.
Like, how much power will they have over government, over culture, over laborers, over so many things?
Yeah.
It's a big moment. I think this is all a big moment, and I'm scared it's all going to go in the wrong direction.
I know, me too.
But here, why don't you talk a little about this? So you are an actor officially on strike. Why don't you give us a rundown of what's happening here? And an actor who is not an A-list celebrity, what your experience
for sure
is in going through something like this.
So basically what we've pulled up here is the SAG AFTRA, which is the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. They are two unions that merged into one a couple of years ago. I guess actually probably about 10 at this point. That's the acting union for voiceover, commercials, film and television. Basically it covers it all, in America at least. So the Writers Guild of America, the WGA, they staged a strike, I guess probably maybe a month ago at this point, something like that, against the film and television industry, the big production houses, because they basically asserted that the contracts that they've been beholden to are not fair. They're fundamentally not fair, and that writers are not receiving adequate recompense for the work that they put in on these projects for big streaming companies, and for production companies like Warner Brothers, HBO, Fox, Disney, like all these sorts of things. And they've been striking, and SAG AFTRA has now officially joined them. So that's the writers and the performers striking against the industry. And the main thing here is that the industry has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. 10 to 15 years, like with the rise of streaming services, the way that we produce, distribute, and access content. And the companies that are making it, that are producing it and distributing it, are not fairly, they're not coming to the table in a fair way for actors and writers. Basically, like it used to be in the day, you would sign on for like a network TV show or something like that. And contracts were written in a way through the unions that you would receive, residuals in perpetuity for as long as like a show is airing or something like that. Like the slice of the pie was fairer. And with streaming, basically like they've had the complete upper hand in terms of the contract. So writers, actors, creative people involved in these shows are not receiving residuals for the work that remains on streamers. So you could say, I'm going to pull a show out of my butt, like Stranger Things. That's like probably Netflix's biggest show. Without question, I would say, probably in viewership, the money that Netflix has made off of Stranger Things, the writers involved are probably not seeing a fraction of what the executives.
I actually have like a concrete example.
Sure. Let's hear.
I was watching a streamer on Twitch, and he actually had Adam Conover join him.
Yeah, he's a great. Yeah, he's a great figure in he's cutting through the crap. Yeah,
and he's been a huge name on the picket lines, I think, for the Writers Guild. But he did the show Adam Ruins Everything on True TV, which is like a
Yeah.
very tiny network compared to like, their biggest show, which is now massive. But years ago when Adam Ruins Everything was on True TV, this was even before Impractical Jokers. But Impractical Jokers has probably made True TV, funny enough, one of the like biggest networks on TV.
Yeah.
But before that, it was even a thing when it was just Adam Ruins Everything on True TV, one of the smallest cable networks in television. He said that his residual checks in a year for that show was around $20,000, I think. Which, that $20,000 to a lot of people is a lot of money, but not when it's stretched out over the course of a year, right? Like,
that is your income. That
right,
is literally
exactly.
your income.
So he is doing that between other forms of income, other writing gigs, other jobs, to create a living salary for himself.
Yeah.
So he said that was his residual on Adam Ruins Everything was $20,000 on a cable network, and that was like the smallest cable network.
Yeah.
He did a show on Netflix called The G Word, which I think is basically like an Adam Ruins Everything 2.0.
Yeah.
His residual check on Netflix for like pretty much the same show, I would not be surprised if it had a bigger audience because it's on Netflix. $500.
Yeah. It's insane.
That's insane. And
that is
Adam
insane.
Conover, like, he's a huge name.
You fundamentally can't live on it. It is not, people are not being paid a livable wage. And you'll see a lot of, I think, a big technique they're going to use for strike busting here is that people have an idea of the entertainment business. They think it's very glamorous. It's very glitzy. And it's no fault of their own. People assume that anyone working in the industry is probably making a ton of money or they're living some lavish lifestyle. In reality,
exactly,
everybody is a working actor. Everybody's a working writer. And what that means is that you are desperately trying to just break even, make a living where you can pay your bills, eat, clothe yourself, keep a roof over your head. Like, the people who are making the millions are maybe the top like 0.5%. Yeah, exactly. Like maybe at the most. People say like, oh, Tom Cruise makes like $200 million in a movie. And it's like, that's Tom Cruise. Yeah. He's like a 1 in a billion kind of person.
I was talking about this on my Twitch stream yesterday. There is a like ridiculous, and people in my chat, again, not to call them out, like a lot of people, there is a sentiment that like, oh, Hollywood writers, like, I don't, like, why would I care about that? Like, they, they can't make millions. Like, that is not what we're talking about at all. You should care about
labor, man. It's a labor.
It's about labor, but even beyond that, like, that is a misconception.
Yeah.
Most of the people we're talking about are people who do like one CSI episode a year and like 3 commercials.
It's a big industry, and the names that you see, I mean, think about the average movie you see. Like, there's like 3 to 5 leads. Right. Those are people who are making probably pretty good money. Either the 2 big name, the A-list star, like Chris Pratt, he's making tens of millions everything he does. Maybe the other lead maybe makes a little bit less. It goes down and down from there, but that's like maybe 3 to 5 people at the most. Think of how many people you see in a movie. Background actors, people who deliver a couple of lines. Like, to fill a story, you need hundreds, dozens, or maybe sometimes hundreds of people. And each of those is a person trying to make rent. Most of them are probably like, if you're in like a Marvel movie, you're a union actor in a Marvel movie, you maybe have like a walk-on where, you're the person who hands a clipboard to Tony Stark, and you say like, here you go, sir. You're getting paid a union day rate for that. Like, you're probably, maybe like $5,000 or something. And that's probably it.
Yeah.
Like, that's not as much as people think. That doesn't stretch,
right. And you don't know when your next job is. Like, you don't know if you'll even work again.
Yeah.
There's like, I even think saying like the people who are on Marvel, like, I 100% agree with you. Those are all people who, like, the smallest people on the Marvel films are making dog shit, and like they are like fighting to live 100%. Like, but I think even saying like the people who make it onto Marvel is still a small percentage of people.
Yeah,
like
that's the person who got the job.
I think that is like, that example will still cause people to have this like, well, they're on a Marvel set. So they should be happy for the exposure. It's like, dude, there are tens of thousands of actors who like will never see a Marvel set, who will like a lot of people, like, they might not even ever see a TV show set. Like, people are like stuck to commercials forever. Like, Think about how many shows on Netflix were canceled. Whenever you see like a list of Netflix canceled these 14 shows last week, think about how many of those shows you never heard of. You didn't hear one word about.
Yeah.
Like there's, and each one of those shows probably has hundreds of actors in it.
Yeah. And not even just actors too, like again, the writers,
The writers too,
the teamsters, the people who are building the sets,
right.
like
all the laborers. It's all labor.
Yeah. There's a statistic of I think right now for SAG AFTRA in the union to qualify for healthcare, you have to make I think like $26,800 or something like that. It's right around there. Less than 10% of the people in the union make that much to have healthcare.
How much was it?
Like it's about 26,000 something and change. Less than 10%. And you could say, and there's a lot of people in the union, and it's like, okay, say
this
like
is SAG, you said?
This is SAG AFTRA. 26 that I'm sorry, like in America, you can't live off of $26,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's like you're doing other work. You're going to be trying to make ends meet. Like that's to give an idea to people who are like, oh, but like everybody's making a ton of money. It's like super glamorous. It's like, it's really not. It's a very tough business. And like the writers are in the same boat and worse in some ways, because they don't even get the glamour maybe eventually of like being seen on screen. Yeah. And it goes back to what we're seeing with the gaming industry too. Like these companies, the reason that people are not getting paid, or the residuals are so low now and stuff, is because the companies can get away with it, and they've been getting away with it. They basically got to write the book on contracts for streaming stuff because it was a totally new form of media, and they're taking advantage of people. And they're paying as little as they physically can.
While this isn't directly related to video games, this is exactly what we're talking about when we say that like the merger of Activision Blizzard and Microsoft is scary, because this is how multi-billion-dollar companies will operate in perpetuity. Is that like they will they are using every loophole possible when it comes to the streaming services, to not pay the people who did the work and earned the right to the money that they're owed. So this is the way that these companies, they will act upon greed in any given way that they can. Any capacity they see to save a dollar, they will do it. So the more that we consolidate in entertainment, in games, anywhere with these massive, this isn't like one small company buying it. This is a massive chunk of the industry for video games, and like Disney, Fox, right, is probably like the closest equivalent in movies. These are the kind of things that will continue to happen as things become more consolidated. We'll see more grotesque greed. We'll see quotes like, we'll just let writers starve and lose their houses and apartments before we negotiate, because you can directly correlate this to the lack of competition. Because when things get to a point where they're so consolidated and they don't have to compete with each other anymore, and the working conditions can just be whatever the three companies decide it is, this kind of shit happens. And if we let this happen in games, well, it'll be maybe even worse than this, because they don't even have unions.
Yeah, so they're trying desperately to unionize.
I think people need to have, like, if you are looking at this situation, you're saying, I don't care about Hollywood elites complaining. Expand your brain for 2 goddamn seconds. Like, stop being an ape, and like think about, one, the labor and the money that's owed in that sense, and 2, that most of the people we're talking about, 99% of people we're talking about in the Writers Guild and the SAG AFTRA Guild, are probably already working 2 to 3 jobs. So you can throw that fucking get a real job argument out the fucking window.
Yeah, some of them are the hardest working people that I've ever known.
Yeah.
Working multiple jobs in the food industry and the service industry, like trying to just do what they're passionate about.
The actress working at a diner is like a trope for a reason. Like that like the writer, the writer like working at Starbucks, like that. These things, like, these aren't stereotypes that like came out of nowhere. It's because these people like rarely find success, like livable success.
To bring it back to gaming as well too, like one of the repercussions of this sort of thing is again, these creative companies, it's like, to them, there was, I think it was, who was the guy, not before Bob Iger, he was like the one in charge of Disney during like the 90s with like the vaulting stuff. Can't remember his name, but he there was a statement where he basically said, like, it is not our obligation to make art. to make good art. He's like, we're a business. We want to make
To the
money, and
shareholders.
if we make good movies along the way, that's great. But that's not our goal. And that's the thing, is like, we'll see this come more and more to games too over time. Any creative medium like that, where these big companies have this control, like, they're not trying to tell a great story. They're not trying to move you emotionally. They're trying to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see more stories written by AI without even a human being involved, because they know, like, it'll make enough money it'll save us money. It'll make some back. The quality goes down. There's examples of the SAG AFTRA joining the strike. One of the reasons was they came with very reasonable demands to these companies, and some of the things that were put back on them were companies saying, like, oh, well, in the new contract, we'll have the ability to scan all of the background actors full body and basically own their likeness to use forever for the rest of their lives in any film we want. Like, that's egregious.
Yeah. Yeah. A
And
lot of this is
like,
coming down to AI. And we
yeah,
just talked about how important it is that Valve is taking a stance of denying games being utilizing AI that were trained on assets that the company does not own copyright to.
yeah,
This is why these things are such big moments, because they will, if the guilds give up that right, creativity is dead in the water
yeah,
in film. And
yeah,
then they'll probably use their likeness in games too.
yeah.
Like in
It
you know
trickles
what I mean?
down.
It's how much are we going to let these companies dictate
Yeah.
is what these moments are right now. So if you're
They're
looking at this and you're like, I don't like this, I don't care about Hollywood liberals fighting to make. I had people in my Twitch chat say, I just saw say like, oh, the WGA guarantees 6-figure salaries. Brother, where did you get that from? What are you talking about?
yeah,
Did Q tell you that?
most people will never make six figures in their lives in the
In the
acting or writing
WGA? Yeah.
industry. Yeah, most people won't. It's just a
Yeah.
fact. Um, there was a kerfuffle on social media in this past, I think it was the past week or two, where this sort of stuff coming back to gaming. There was a voice actor from, I think she was in the Persona series, um, who had someone just basically fed her voice lines to an AI, created an AI voice, and then put up some video. It wasn't like an offensive video. It wasn't, they didn't monetize it, but they created like some parody video using her voice through an AI. And she understandably got very upset about that and was like, take this down, blah, blah, blah. And like the person basically like came back and was like, no, it's mine. Like, I had the right to do this. And it turned into a whole giant thing. This poor woman wound up getting harassed by these people who blue checks on Twitter, who were like, like, they can do whatever they want. And like, she deactivated her accounts, and like all these other voice actors came along to basically say, like, this is what we're afraid of. This is what we're
Right, right.
terrified of, that like
This
people
is our
can just,
labor. This is our labor being abused and
yeah,
misused.
and like our bodies and our voices and our
Yeah.
likenesses, which is a really terrifying thing, to basically say, oh, someone can just take it and just do whatever they want with it, whether
I
that's
feel like they have
compromising
onus over
material, whether they
me.
monetize it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
disgusting.
so
And
some of the best
that's what the
performances,
studios. That's what the studios are talking about, writers and actors. And if you think that this won't apply to the gaming industry as it becomes more consolidated, you're fucking fooling yourself.
yeah, they'll AI generate as many voices as they can to save money. I mean, I've done voice work on games. Like, it's already pretty down on the totem pole in terms of priorities, and like they'll lower it even more. If they can get away with not paying voice actors, they will.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't wait to if anyone hears this and there's gonna be so much goalpost moving. They're like, oh, Microsoft would never do this. Microsoft would never, oh my god, Microsoft is they just want to compete with Sony. Shut up, stop, cut it out. Like, just Google the past 20 years of Microsoft's history and things they've tried to do. It and the quality of what they've put out over the last 10 years. Like, stop. They don't care. Stop apologizing for them. They don't care. Get mad at them. Get mad at
Demand more,
what is
demand
it?
better.
The double A whatever. What's the AA whatever the hell it's called? The union for the AMPTP. The AMPTP, that's like the collection of studios.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like we're not talking about making sure every writer gets millions of dollars. We're talking about making sure people can live, and we're
yeah,
talking about making sure that these companies have some kind of check There needs to be some kind of check and balance against these companies that are
Yeah.
basically running the government at this point.
I think a good comparison too to that might, knock some sense into people too is again, there's always going to be people who say like, well, this is still like a luxury industry, like you chose to be a part of it. So like whether you get paid or not, like you can always go do something else. The things that are happening here are, imagine you're like, well, I'm safe because I have a good, white collar job, or I have a good blue collar job. Like I work hard better, I work harder than any of these actors. Like your job might get automated.
Yeah.
Imagine that happening, and imagine other people coming in and saying like, sucks to be you, dude. Like
Yeah.
they need to save money. Like their profits, dude. Like, and people are going to defend the corporations. Like, and you lose your job because an AI can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to say, well,
or a robot.
I matter. I'm a human being. There you go. It's like these things matter.
All human beings. And again, we're not talking about the top 0.5%. We're talking about the 99.5% of tens of thousands of people, human beings, who are like struggling in the same way you probably are.
Yeah.
That's what it is. What let's wrap it up. What do you hope to see as a member of SAG AFTRA?
It's tough to say because like I'm not actively involved in the theatrical world anymore, and like the game contract stuff is different. But again, like these are the precedents that are being set, and I have tons of friends, family, folks that I love who are involved in the acting world and in the arts. And I think that from a labor perspective, from just a cultural perspective, this is so important. Like I don't want to see like everything just burn down completely, but like I want to see some humanity come from these companies, for God's sake. Like even just a little bit, like some
Bob
acknowledgement
Iger's quote was like particularly Bob Iger and the leaked quote of the apartments and stuff. That was like,
man has a net worth of about $600 million, makes $27 million a year, and he says that these demands are just they're unreasonable. It's distressing, really.
Right.
Like it's just
that
these people are
industry.
Like you're disrupting an industry.
I've actually like mostly liked Bob Iger's tenure. I'm kind of surprised that this is like the voice that he chose to put on for this.
When push comes to shove, man, these people will always fight against labor. Like it's as simple as that. Like I said, I would like to see, whether it's forced out of them or whether it's actually acknowledged by choice, like some shred of humanity and empathy for the people who create the art that they sell. Writers and actors create the product. These people in the suits don't. They distribute, they produce, they don't make it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to see new contracts drawn up that give people an actual sizable part of these profits, because they're making record profits. All these streamers are. Like there needs to be fundamental lines drawn about your likeness being used, what you're paid for a day's work, what you're paid for residuals, which I think is really important. And there need to be contractual obligations, I think, to not have shows, movies, whatever, removed from streaming with no warning whatsoever for a tax break, and to avoid paying residuals.
We didn't even talk about that, but not only is it for them to save money and get money back on their taxes, it's for them to it kills residual payments. That's a really good point. I didn't even think
if the residuals are already low, but again, that is the income. If you're ever going to have one as an actor,
$200 might mean a lot to somebody who's only making like $20,000 in that year.
Yeah,
but it will make a lot. That is a chunk, like a 5% of their salary or some shit.
Yeah, and these companies will say, okay, well, we've got this on the service, and as long as it's on the service, we have to pay like. It's probably not even that much on their bottom line, but they'll cut it where they can. Like, oh, let's say every year that this show remains on our service, we have to pay, I don't know, $1 million in total to everybody involved, split up between them. If we remove it, then we don't.
Right.
Like there has to be some kind of protection about that to at least like a bare minimum amount of time.
Scarlett Johansson, like she sued for her right to her chunk of cash when Disney decided to make Black Widow a stream exclusive releases at the theaters, which
that's an example. It changes the contract. It changes how these things are done.
They probably were inclined to do that because then they didn't have to give her a share. Her payment was structured on ticket sales, a portion of ticket sales. They didn't have to share that then, and she had to fight for her money. And again, that's a 0.5% example, but on a small scale, this is affecting people who don't make that much money, under 20K, under 30K.
People are just asking for protections for their rights and privacy to their appearance and the way they look and sound, but also just a fair wage for, even if you say like the amount of work, because that's subjective and can change, like based on the profits that these things are making for these companies. Like there has to be like a percentage of that. There has to be something that these people see, because it's all going there. Someone on Twitter was like, you know, like why isn't there any like, you know, whatever happened to like movies with like $12 million budgets? Why is everything like 100 million, 2 million, 200 million? And someone was like, you know, as an industry insider, there's a quote that was something like, it's really hard to steal $1 million from a $12 million budget. You know, it's like the way these things get ballooned. It's like people siphon it off. Like it goes to these companies and to the people in charge of them. Like there has to be oversight for this sort of thing. Like the industry is essentially in an unregulated place right now with how it's shifted to the streamers, to digital distribution. Like, yeah.
The more extrapolated things become, the easier it is to, you know, fund dollars here in one part of the company, fund dollars there in another part of the company, restructured things. Oh my God, ended up in the bonus funds.
Yeah. Oops. Oh, $50 million from the Flash's budget wound up in my pocket. Oops. Like.
Also, I don't know if you watched Fran Drescher's speech or any of it. It was pretty fiery. But the biggest point she made, in my opinion, was like, the business model has changed dramatically. So now the contracts have to change too. And
they have to keep up. That's the fundamental
thing. To think that the laborers involved aren't wise to that is insane. And I actually think that the whatever that guild is, the of the studios, the AMPTP, I actually think they might be dumb enough to think that people aren't wise enough to think so. I'm not even kidding. I think they're super out of touch. But we'll end it here. Anything else you want to say? The last thing I'll say is hail Fran, dude. Dude. Fran killed it. She's killing
Fran's
it.
my queen. I get voicemails from SAG AFTRA all the time because I usually don't pick up, and it's like a robocall from. It's like, this is your union president, Fran Drescher, calling about the union vote on. And literally, she sounds exactly the same. It's so
like
funny.
Nanny? Yeah.
It's
so funny.
It's just her voice. This is your union president, Fran Drescher.
It's so funny. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude.
This took a more serious turn, but like it's important to talk about. You know, like this stuff it affects us all.
I think we're in a big moment that it's not directly related to the games. We're talking about big corporations. So all hail Fran.
Hail Fran. Let's see it.
Right.
Let's see it, Fran. Get that contract. Write it up, baby.
Yeah, write it up, Fran. Dude, go off, Queen. Pop off. All right, we'll be back. I would like to record again on Wednesday. We didn't get to touch on everything. This is all like super interesting stuff. It just feels like this type of stuff is culminating more and more to a head. So I love talking about this stuff, and I hope people enjoyed listening. You can follow us over pretty much Twitch, Twitter, TikTok. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at SRankPod. You can follow me at twitch.tv/NoBananaSuits. Welsh is at SeanWelshBrown on Twitter. We hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll be back.
And Threads.
And Threads.
Twitter Threads, dude. Please. It's taken over.
Threads is so bad. But I want to record on Wednesday again, so hopefully we'll get back onto our Thursday release schedule. We're just busy week, man. Busy week of conglomerates running our lives, literally. Yeah. All right. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Catch you later.
Peace.